Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. So today we're diving into something I think a lot of us have probably wondered about, especially if you're considering, investing in an e-bike. Can you actually, ride these things in the rain? Specifically, we're talking Gazelle e-bikes today. And you guys sent us a ton of great stuff, marketing materials, tech specs from Gazelle, even some behind-the-scenes looks at their testing process. It's going to be good. Luckily, we've got our expert here to help break it all down.
And I'm excited to be here. What I find so interesting about this whole question is that, well, it's not really a simple yes or no answer. We're going to really uncover why Gazelle e-bikes are kind of uniquely ready for those rainy days. We're talking design, geography, even a little peek into Dutch culture.
Okay, you had me at Dutch culture. So just to set the stage for anyone who maybe hasn't, dived into the world of Gazelle yet, they're based in the Netherlands, right? Famous for canals, windmills, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, probably a good amount of rain, too.
You're not wrong about that.
Yeah.
In the Netherlands, cycling, it's not just a hobby. It is a way of life. Think rain or shine. People rely on those bikes. And Gazelle, they get it. That whole environment, it's baked into their company DNA.
Okay, so no messing around when it comes to building a bike that can handle a little or a lot of water, which reminds me of that video you sent of their factory testing.
Intense.
Intense is putting it mildly. 18,000 kilometers on a roller conveyor. That's like biking coast to coast across the U.S., 4 times. And then they dunk those things in a salt bath. Don't forget the salt bath. Simulating 2 years of wear and tear, but in 7 days. These bikes are really put through the ringer.
You got it. And there's a good reason for all of it. Think about Seattle, Vancouver. You sent over some really cool comparison charts, these places, along with the Netherlands, that classic temperate maritime climate. You know what that means? Rain.
Yeah, and not just sprinkle here and there. We're talking consistent, sometimes heavy rain. So Gazelle, they're not just designing for a drizzle, they're designing for the worst case scenario.
Exactly. But, and this is important, Gazelle e-bikes, yeah, they're built for the wet stuff, but it's key to remember, water resistant, not waterproof. There's a difference.
Ooh, okay, hold on. That seems like kind of a big deal. What's the difference there, and why does it matter for someone, considering getting a Gazelle?
Think of it this way. Water resistant is like a really, really good sturdy raincoat. Waterproof. That's like a full-on scuba suit.
Okay.
You're going to be dry no matter what in that scuba suit.
Mm-hmm.
But the raincoat depends how much water's coming at you and what you're doing in it, right?
So splashing through a puddle, probably fine. Taking my Gazelle for an underwater spin,
Yeah.
probably not on the agenda.
Exactly. A little splash here, a little splash there, the bike can handle it. Submerging the motor, especially the battery. That's when you might run into some issues.
Makes sense. You've got me thinking about these batteries now, though. Are they, a particularly vulnerable spot on Gazelle e-bikes? Makes sense.
Gazelle, they actually use these, high-quality Bosch e-bike systems. And those are already designed with water resistance in mind. But, yeah, it's electronics, right? You want to be careful, especially with water.
Right. So even if the bike itself is good to go for a splash or two, it's more about how we treat those parts, especially that battery. Kind of I don't know, my phone. It might be water resistant, but I'm not taking it swimming with me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just like you wouldn't, dunk your phone in a puddle, you want to be sure that battery compartment on your Gazelle, it's really securely closed before you head out, especially if it's raining. Simple thing, but it makes a difference. A quick wipe down when you get home doesn't hurt either, just to be safe.
Great advice. And speaking of being mindful, remember how we were talking about brakes earlier? You mentioned that when it's wet out, you got to give yourself some extra stopping distance. What's that all about?
So braking in the rain, super important. And Gazelle e-bikes, they do have really good braking systems.
Mm-hmm.
But even the best brakes, right, they need a little help when those roads get wet. It all comes down to traction.
Right, less grip on wet surfaces. Makes sense. Okay, but are there any specific Gazelle models, just hypothetically, that are known for having really good brakes in the rain? Asking for a friend who might be in the market.
Well, if your friend wants to be extra prepared for rainy conditions, you can't go wrong with the Gazelle Ultimate T10. It comes standard with hydraulic disc brakes, and those offer way better stopping power than rim brakes, especially in the rain.
Hold on, back up for a second. For those of us who aren't, bike mechanics, what's the difference between hydraulic disc brakes and rim brakes? And why are those hydraulic ones so much better in the wet stuff?
Good question. Okay, so super basic explanation. Rim brakes. They work by, pressing pads against the wheel's rim to slow you down. Hydraulic disc brakes, they use calipers to squeeze pads against a rotor that's like attached to the wheel hub. The big difference in the rain is rem brakes. They can lose their stopping power when the rims get wet, while those disc brakes, especially the hydraulic ones, not as affected by the water.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like the difference between trying to grip a wet plate versus a wet doorknob. The doorknob, or in this case, that disc brake, is going to give you a much more solid hold. So if you're the type of person who's going to be riding a lot in the rain, maybe a Gazelle with those hydraulic disc brakes, like that Ultimate P10 you mentioned, that's something to think about.
Yeah, for sure. Choosing the right bike, it's all about your needs.
Yeah.
Right, and the environment you're riding in. Speaking of, we've talked a lot about rain, but what about other kinds of weather? Like, have you ever thought about riding a Gazelle in, say, the snow?
Now, that's an interesting thought. We know they're built for those damp, rainy places, but snow and ice, that's a whole other can of worms.
For sure. Traction gets even more important with snow and ice. And then, of course, there's the cold. What's that going to do to your battery?
Right. Nobody wants a dead battery in a blizzard. So what do you think? Can you, or can you not, brave a snowy commute on a Gazelle? Or is that pushing it? So what do you think? Can you or can you not brave a snowy commute on a Gazelle? Or is that pushing it?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? I mean, Gazelle e-bikes, they are built tough. And yeah, those European winters, they get wet. So Gazelle's definitely thinking about that. But heavy snow and ice, it's a whole different ballgame, even for a company that knows rain like they do.
Right. It's one thing to handle a little rain, but navigating icy streets, totally different. So for our listeners out there, what should they be thinking about if they're really considering taking their Gazelle out in the snow?
Okay, well, first things first. Remember those comparisons you sent over Seattle, Vancouver? Yeah, they get rain, but they're not exactly known for like those Siberian winters.
Good point.
Gazelles. Built for the first one, not necessarily the second.
Okay, so maybe a light dusting of snow, you're probably fine. But a full-on blizzard, might want to think twice.
Exactly. And remember, it's not just a bike ride. Think about your tires. The traction on ice, way different than a wet street. Plus, cold temperatures, your battery life is going to take a hit.
So say someone out there is a diehard year-round e-bike commuter. Snow or no snow, they're out there. What are their options?
Well, some Gazelles are definitely more ready for those conditions than others. For example, the Gazelle Arroyo C8 Elite. That one comes with studded tires. So you're getting way better grip on snow and ice than you would with your standard tires. Plus, that Bosch Performance Line motor, plenty of power for those snowy hills. But again, it's all relative, like riding on a flat bike path with a little snow. Very different from, a steep, icy hill.
Right. Got to be realistic about it. Safety first, always.
100%. If you're unsure about the conditions or your Gazelle, better be safe than sorry. Maybe stick to indoor cycling when the snow really starts coming down.
Sounds like a plan to me. Okay, so big takeaways here. Gazelle e-bikes, built for the rain, no problem. Snow, little trickier. Got to check your model, think about those tires, and most importantly, common sense.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And hey, a little extra research never hurts. If you're really, really serious about riding that Gazelle in the snow, there's tons of info out there. Forums, articles. Do your homework.
Always good advice. Well, this has been seriously eye-opening. Who knew there was so much to learn about e-bikes and, the weather?
Right. It just goes to show you, even the simplest questions, they can lead to some pretty cool discoveries.
For sure. A huge thanks to our expert for being an expert on this. And to you listening, hopefully you feel a little more ready to get out there and enjoy that Gazelle, rain or shine, or maybe even a little snow.
And hey, remember, a few precautions, a little common sense, and your Gazelle can handle just about anything. Until next time, keep on riding.
See you next time on The Deep Dive.
The Herd Podcast is produced by the Gazelle International Owners Group on Facebook. The managing editor and executive producer is Gary Fujioka Sr.